Thanks, Minister. And pardon me, my voice is a bit weak, but I want to use it to say to you that I don't believe, when you say that the plan fulfils the legal requirement, I don't actually believe that. And I don't believe it because there are so many important sources who are disputing that with you. Like, for example, the EPA, Professor John Sweeney, Professor Barry McMullen on Taoiseach, and they all say that the every measure promised is kicked down the road and that we're set not to reach our targets. So I think we need to dig down into what's going on here, because the EPA last year confirmed that up to the second quarter of 2022, Ireland's emissions grew once again, making it the biggest emitter per capita in the European Union. And we don't have a plan that has a hope or an ambition of staying within the law. The emissions are now on track to exceed the combined 10-year target budget by 23% to 36%. And I want to say this, and I know I bang on about it a lot, but specifically in relation to the electricity sector, your claim that every home will be heated by renewable energy by 2030 is to me delusional, particularly given what's happening within the data centre sector. And you've just ordered a series of gas-fired generations to plug a hole caused by the surge in demand from data centres and the proliferation of them. I mean, you talk about a rapidly growing economy. This is one area of absolute rapid growth in our economy that we could do without. We've just learned, or confirmed from Crew this week, that there are another 16 data centres, 8 of them mega data centres, to be connected to the national grid in the next couple of years. So it seems to me that the strategy is to kick the can down the road. And while there's a huge amount of focus on the target for 2030, there isn't enough focus on the immediate targets and what we're reaching. So we did a perusal of the plan, and the mention of 2030 appears within the current plan 279 times in the document. By comparison, 2025 appears only 184 times, and that would seem to confirm that the emphasis is to meet a notional and still conveniently remote 2030 target of reducing emissions by 51% on a 2018 base year. And I think that that means that we're failing to live within the budget. And what matters most is that the wasted opportunity and the failure to live within that budget will mean that the next government will have to meet those legal obligations, and something that would pose really great difficulties given the restricted allocation for the second 5-year period. So I think that's a question that needs to be answered, and I would ask you to try and answer that, along with repeating the question of LULUCF. When you haven't a plan for it, how can you haven't established a ceiling for the sector, how can we say that this particular target has been reached when it's been omitted? I just think it's impossible for you to actually stand over that statement.
Correct me if I'm wrong now, the official beside me, Mark will be able to do it, but I think it was roughly in June last year that we got some of the sense, the real detailed sense of how big the gap was on LULUCF. And we were then last summer faced with having to set sectoral emission ceilings. And the choice could have been to put something in which was just completely without any foundation of policy analysis or scientific analysis, or to do what we did, which was to admit the problem, be upfront on it, and absolutely clear about the scale of the gap, and to say we're going to need to do further work because we can't give an immediate, accurate assessment of what's the best approach to take. And I think that was, well, I stand by that decision, and we'll go into court and argue that, that we believe that was the right approach to take. I don't doubt it for 1 minute, Professor Sweeney or Professor McMullen or others' ambition or motivation or the absolute correctness of their position, that we do have to meet we do collectively have to deliver the climate targets that we're committed to. But I believe it will be better done spending this year to assess in real detail what that means. And I do that because we are also in a democratic constitutional republic where you don't just operate by fiat. You do have to have the support of the Oireachtas. You do have to support it. And if we were just to say, click our fingers and say, we're going to solve this problem just by closing a whole swathe of industry here, or shut down a whole sector of Irish society there, or some other mechanism to deliver the reduction, I don't think that would be either constitutionally, democratically correct, but also it would be achievable. So we do have to live within the reality of our political world of getting support and getting consensus and getting a majority in the Oireachtas to agree to what needs to be done. And sometimes that requires time spent generating the analysis, sharing it, assessing it, and then setting policy positions, and that's what's happening as we speak. But
Minister, then what you're saying really is, this is all great on paper. There's a lot of really good research and ambition on paper, but the reality flies in the face of that. If we can't intervene, for example, to cut agricultural emissions, if we can't intervene to stop the proliferation of data centres because we live in a democracy, then this is going to be impossible to achieve.
It's not just on paper. There are 33,000 hectares of land that has been re-wetted as we speak, which is actually reducing real emissions. And yes, I want to get that up. Is it 80,000 or so we're setting as the target? So that's not paper, that's real. And the forestry programme, which was introduced in November, that's not just paper, that's hard cash, and really revolutionary in what I think it will deliver. And we're going to start to see very quickly now, in my mind, a massive expansion in plantation of forestry here on the back of really good, like a 1.3 billion euro budget behind that is not just paper, that's real. So we can and will do this. And as we do it, we'll show that it's not actually, as some might depict it, anti-rural or anti-farming, or it's about making sure we have a really secure future for the Irish family farm and provide the funding for that and the training for it. But it does take a certain amount of time. I mean, our biggest restriction, go back to again, in all these areas as people, we have only 2 forestry courses putting out forestry graduates, and we have a real shortage. So you do have to, it'd be nice to click your fingers and say, I want 5,000 foresters tomorrow, but they do have to come with training and with financial support, and the government will provide it. Can I say a second just tenet? I mean, if the first one is you have to get democratic consent. The second one is the state doesn't break contracts. I accept your point about those data centres adding to our electricity demand and that putting real pressure on us. But this state does not go back on its word. If you've signed a contract, if someone has an agreement with the state in terms of getting a grid connection or getting planning permission, you don't just say, well, we've changed our mind because there's another policy issue that we have to address. So those data centres will come online. But what we need to do is to make sure that the electricity system that provides for them is able to decarbonise at the same time, and that they too also start by the regulations and the way that they operate start to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Can I say, you said there about the introduction of new power generation, gas-fired power generation being a problem. We do need that power generation. Any analysis of how you decarbonise an Irish electricity system would recognise that you do need balancing capability for those weeks, that week before Christmas when the wind didn't blow for a week. You do need some mechanism. You can't say to the Irish people, oh, I'm going to decarbonise your electricity system 52 weeks of the year and I'm going to leave you without heating or power or light in the week when you need it most. You do have to provide that for that week or 2 weeks in the year, and we're going to do that, and we are doing it.
My point was not to deny that we needed it, not at all. What I said was that we needed it because of the proliferation of data centres and the amount of energy that they guzzle up from the national grid. It's totally out of kilter with any other state. They do not allow it to go to 15, 16% of the national grid. I
think they're separate issues. I think primarily we need it because we need to switch off Money Point, is what I said earlier, and switch off Tarbert. Tarbert's going to switch off anyway because it's coming to the end of its life. But that's, and in those weeks, it's not when the wind isn't blowing It's not just because of the data centres. It is, there you're into your overall balancing demand capabilities. So that gas generation has to be developed now, as we're going to do so, which will be hydrogen, compatible. So you can start switching. You can look at it having dual fuel capability. But we will deliver that it's some 2 gigawatts of additional gas, 2.5 gigawatts of additional gas we need. That's part of the decarbonising plan, and actually, it's being delivered. I mean, a lot of us were very worried. People were very worried we wouldn't be able to get through this winter without power cuts. And I touch wood, because you can never, like, some of those big power plants could go down tomorrow and we could be in real difficulty. But so far, we've been showing real ability to manage what is a very tight situation. And that's a real responsibility.
Just finally, would the Minister comment on the EPA report of, as Ireland being the biggest emitter per capita in the EU on the second quarter, up to the second quarter of 2022?
Yeah, you can't deny the science on this. The facts are we have very high emissions per capita. If you look at the reasons behind that, we have a very large agricultural sector. We have a very dispersed transport system, a model of planning and housing which has been embedded over the last 60, 70 years. And we've also very, very high dependence on fossil fuels. So you can't deny the science the EPA presents. What are the solutions? We switch to renewables and away from fossils. We build back, we do what the National Planning Framework says. We get better balanced regional development, we get compact development and low carbon development. And then and agriculture and land use does have to change. But it'll be a change for the better, because we'll have to pay young farmers and families to provide some of the nature-based solutions that are going to be part of this change.
Thanks, Mr.